I thought I knew my husband. I thought I understood each of his sighs, each prolonged silence, each short message that came accompanied by vague excuses. I thought true love meant accepting, understanding, waiting. But on that cold Friday in Seoul, when I decided to do something that should have been simple and beautiful, prepare a special lunchbox and surprise him at work, I discovered that love can hide betrayals so deep that we can't even imagine being capable of surviving them. And worse, I discovered that sometimes the person who sleeps beside us, who shares the same roof, who breathes the same air, is actually living an entirely parallel life. A life where you don't exist, where you're just an inconvenient detail. Before I continue with this story that still makes me tremble when I remember it, I need to ask you something. If you've ever felt this kind of pain, that sensation of having the ground open beneath your feet when you discover you've been deceived by the person you trusted most, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It's not just for the algorithm. It's not just for numbers. It's because I need more people to know they're not alone in this, that this pain doesn't choose social class, age, or place, that it's democratic in its cruelty, and that it is possible, yes, to be reborn after it. I am living proof of that. It was a cold winter Friday in Seoul, the kind of cold that penetrates your bones, that makes each breath hurt in your lungs, that transforms the simple act of leaving home into a small battle against the elements. But I was strangely excited that morning, an almost naive excitement, almost adolescent, as if I were planning something romantic and special. The wind cut across my face as I walked through the wide streets of Gangnam later, holding tightly to the light pink thermal bag, the one he gave me on our second wedding anniversary, with the lunchbox I had prepared hours earlier, when the world was still dark and silent. Inside the bag, packed with all the care I could muster, was fragrant, fluffy white rice, bulgogi marinated exactly the way he always praised, with an extra touch of toasted sesame, homemade kimchi fermented for 3 days, following the secret recipe my mother-in-law taught me in the first months of marriage, saying that's how she won my father-in-law's heart, and the fresh ginger tea he always asked for on mornings when he woke up looking like he'd drunk too much the night before, with deep, dark circles and a hoarse voice. It had been more than 4 months since we'd had lunch together, 123 days, to be exact. Yes, I was counting. I counted because each day that passed without that simple connection, sitting together, sharing a meal, looking into each other's eyes without hurry, was like a small death of what we had once been. I counted each time he said, in that tone of voice that mixed guilt and irritation, "Not today, love. I have an important meeting I can't postpone." Each time he arrived too late, when dinner had been cold for hours, and I had already given up waiting. Each time I fell asleep, alone on the left side of the king-size bed we bought together, waiting for the familiar sound of the key turning in the lock, but waking up alone again, with him having already left before dawn. But that specific morning, something inside me, perhaps a last spark of hope, perhaps just deep denial, made me wake up at 5 a.m. I looked to the side and saw him sleeping. His face was relaxed, almost beautiful in its unconscious vulnerability. His breathing was slow, rhythmic, peaceful. In that moment, seeing him like that, without the masks he wore when awake, without the distance he maintained when conscious, I felt a sudden and overwhelming urge to save him, to save us both, to prove that we were still that couple in love who danced awkwardly at our wedding to a song we chose together. It was a simple idea, almost simplistic in its innocence. Surprise him at work, bring him a meal made with love, remind him, through the taste of the food he loved, of who I was, that he had a wife who still cared, that we still existed. I got out of bed with surgical care, as if any sudden movement could break the moment. The house was wrapped in that dense, profound silence of 5 a.m, only the distant, mechanical sound of the heater running, sending warm air through the cold corners of our 3-bedroom apartment in Gangnam. I put on the blue satin robe he gave me last Christmas. Had she helped him choose it? Was he already with her that Christmas? And walked barefoot to the kitchen. I turned on only the light above the stove, creating a circle of yellowish brightness that seemed welcoming, almost magical. I opened the refrigerator silently. I took out the ingredients one by one, as if I were performing a sacred ritual. The purple onions I bought at the market 3 days before, the beef already marinated since the previous night, the kimchi that had been fermenting for exactly 3 days in the traditional ceramic pot, the fresh ginger that still had that intense, spicy aroma. I began to prepare everything slowly, putting love into each gesture, slicing the onions into thin, uniform pieces, sautéing the meat over medium heat, listening to the satisfying sizzle when it touched the hot pan, adjusting the seasoning with obsessive care, an extra pinch of toasted sesame, a few drops of sesame oil, brown sugar to balance. Each movement was a silent prayer, a wordless plea that this would be enough, that he would see me again, that we would become us again. Today will be different, I thought, as I stirred the meat, watching the dark, glossy sauce envelop each piece. Today we'll laugh again. Today he'll remember why he married me. Today I'll save him from this distant person he's become. How naive I was. How terribly, painfully naive. When I finished, it was almost 7 a.m. Daylight was beginning to enter timidly through the kitchen window. I packed everything with almost obsessive care. I placed each item in its appropriate container. I organized everything inside the thermal bag so nothing would mix or spill. And then, in an impulse that now makes me blush with shame, I wrote a note by hand on pink paper decorated with small hearts. To the love of my life, to the man who promised to be with me in all moments. This food was made by the hands of someone who still loves you. With all the affection in the world, your wife who never forgets you, who never forgot you, who will never forget you. I folded the note and placed it inside the bag, between the containers. Before leaving, I stopped in the living room. I looked at the wedding portrait hanging above the old dark wood dresser, the one that belonged to his grandmother. In the photo, we were both smiling, not that forced smile of someone posing, but genuine luminous smiles, full of a joy that seemed unbreakable. He held my hand tightly, fingers intertwined. I held the bouquet of white lilies. Your flowers, he had said, because lilies symbolize purity and eternal devotion. At the time, I thought the phrase was beautiful, romantic, movie-worthy. I remember that day perfectly. It was autumn, 3 years ago. The hall was decorated with hundreds of white candles. Guests filled every chair. And when I began to walk down the aisle, seeing him waiting for me at the altar with eyes that shone with emotion, I felt I was living the most important day of my life, that everything before that moment had been just preparation for that instant. At the moment of the vows, he took my hands, which were trembling so much I could barely hold them steady, and said with a choked voice, "You are the only person I want by my side forever, on all the good days and all the bad days, in wealth and in poverty, in health and in sickness. You are my safe harbor, my home, my peace, and I promise, before everyone here present and before God, that I will love you unconditionally until my last breath." I cried. I cried so much that my makeup smudged, and it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was the truest thing that ever happened to me, or at least that's what I thought. Looking at that photo now, on that Friday morning, I held the thermal bag tighter against my chest and whispered to the photo, to him, to myself, "We can do this. We always can." And I left home, leaving him still sleeping, not knowing that in a few hours my entire life would crumble. I took the crowded Line 2 subway around 10 in the morning. I descended the stairs at Seoling Station, being pushed by the crowd that moved like a single mechanical, hurried creature. The car was absurdly full for that hour. Tired faces pressed against each other, gazes lost in illuminated cell phone screens, people whispering bored conversations about work, money, problems. The air was heavy, loaded with mixed perfumes, discreet sweat, and that characteristic smell of metal and electricity that every subway seems to have. I was there, standing near the door, holding the yellow support strap with one hand, my fingers already white from gripping so tightly, and the thermal bag against my chest with the other, as if I were protecting something precious, my treasure, my peace offering, my last attempt to prove we still existed as a couple. Feeling my heart beat so fast I thought I was going to faint at any moment, as if I were a 15-year-old girl going on a first date with her school crush, as if we weren't married for 5 years, as if this were the beginning of something, not the end. I smiled to myself, a small, secret smile that no one around me noticed or cared about. I imagined the scene that was about to happen in cinematic detail, me entering the restaurant, him looking up and seeing me standing there with the lunchbox, surprise taking over his face, that beautiful, wide smile I hadn't seen in months slowly opening, him getting up from his chair and coming to me, hugging me right there in front of everyone, whispering in my ear, "Thank you for still caring." Maybe even a tear of emotion glistening in the corner of his eyes. What an idiot I was. What a complete, irredeemably foolish idiot. The subway ride lasted 23 minutes. 23 minutes of intoxicating hope, mixed with a growing anxiety that I couldn't name at the time, but that I now recognize as intuition. That small, insistent voice in the back of your mind that you ignore because you don't want to hear the truth, because the truth is too scary, because recognizing the truth means having to do something about it. I fed those romantic fantasies like someone feeding a plant that is clearly dying, with blind hope, obstinate dedication, and a deep denial of the obvious reality. I kept watering it, kept adding fertilizer, kept talking to it, thinking that if I tried hard enough, if I believed enough, if I loved enough, the plant would bloom again. The subway rattled on the tracks. With each curve, passengers leaned from one side to the other in a collective, involuntary movement. I closed my eyes for a second, breathed deeply. It's going to work out, I repeated mentally like a mantra. It's going to work out. It's going to work out. It's going to work out. Gangnam Station was as crowded as always. A chaotic mixture of businessmen in dark suits carrying leather briefcases, students with enormous backpacks, tourists with cameras hanging from their necks, elegant women with designer bags. Everyone moving in a hurry, everyone going somewhere important, everyone part of an urban choreography I knew so well after years of living in Seoul. I climbed the escalators slowly, so different from the people who ran up the steps, overtaking those standing still, holding tight to the thermal bag. I felt the cold wind from outside receive me with brutal force as soon as I left the station. The air was cutting, that dry winter cold that makes your nose hurt and your eyes water. But for me, at that moment, with that adrenaline running through my veins, with that foolish hope shining in my chest, it seemed like the day had a special light, a magical quality, as if the universe were conspiring in my favor. I walked through the wide streets of Gangnam, passing the gleaming glass and steel skyscrapers that reflected the gray sky heavy with snow clouds. I passed the giant display windows of designer stores, Chanel, Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton, where perfect mannequins displayed clothes that cost more than I earned in 3 months. I passed the elegant modern cafeterias, full of young people working on laptops while drinking 15,001 coffees, steam rising from the cups and fogging the large windows. The smell of roasted coffee escaped from each cafe, mixing with the aroma of food coming from the Korean snack shops, spicy tteokbokki, steaming odeng, sweet hoteok. My stomach rumbled. I had left home without eating anything, too nervous to be able to swallow anything, but I ignored the hunger. I had something more important ahead. When I finally arrived at the restaurant, I stopped on the sidewalk in front for a few seconds, just breathing, looking, preparing myself. It was a place I knew well. We had come here together countless times in the first years of marriage. A traditional but sophisticated Korean restaurant, the kind of place where businessmen take important clients, where families celebrate special occasions. The building had 3 floors. The facade was dark stone, and the gold lettering gleamed even without the help of the sun hidden behind the clouds. Myeongdong Hanok, a name that promised tradition and quality. The large, clean windows, with dark wooden frames, allowed me to see the cozy interior, solid wood tables arranged with generous space between them, soft, yellowish lights creating an intimate atmosphere, customers dressed in elegant clothes conversing and laughing, clearly enjoying their meals. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with cold air until it hurt. I adjusted my hair, which the wind had completely messed up, ran my hand over my black wool coat to smooth any wrinkles that might have appeared during the subway ride. I looked at my distorted reflection in the restaurant's window. I looked like a normal woman, a dedicated wife making a surprise visit to her husband. Nothing extraordinary, nothing that could predict the catastrophe that was about to happen. I smiled at my own reflection, a nervous but hopeful smile. "You can do this," I said to myself in a low voice, almost a whisper. "He'll love it. He'll remember how much he loves you. He'll remember us." I pushed the heavy wooden and glass door. A delicate little bell rang announcing my entrance, a small, cheerful sound that seemed absurdly inappropriate for what was about to happen. The warmth of the restaurant enveloped me immediately, a shocking contrast to the cutting cold outside. The smell was overwhelming. Charcoal grilled meat, garlic roasted in butter, caramelized soy sauce, fermented kimchi, rice cooking in steam. There was laughter throughout the place, the comforting sound of happy people sharing meals, the delicate clinking of crystal glasses touching in toasts, the low but constant sound of forks and knives touching ceramic plates. It was a cheerful, vibrant atmosphere, full of life. I stood at the entrance for a few seconds, letting my eyes adjust to the softer interior light. searching for him. My heart was racing so fast I could hear my own pulse beating in my ears. My hands were sweating inside my wool gloves, holding the thermal bag so tightly that my fingers were beginning to go numb. That's when I heard it. 2 employees dressed in elegant uniforms, impeccable white shirts and black aprons tied at the waist, were talking near the dark wood reception desk where the reservations book was. One of them was older, perhaps 50 years old, with short hair dyed black. The other was young, no more than 25, with a face still round with youth. They were smiling, sharing some kind of internal gossip, that intimacy that only co-workers develop after years of shared shifts. And then, without realizing I was standing there just a few meters away, without realizing that each word that came out of their mouths would be like a knife being slowly pushed into my chest, one of them said, not very loud, but loud enough for me to hear perfectly, "She's not the wife he brings every month, is she?" I felt as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over my head. The world around me became blurry at the edges. The sound of conversations transformed into a distant, meaningless buzz. My heart didn't just accelerate. It stopped for a complete beat, then came back with triple force, pumping blood so fast I felt dizzy. The other employee gave a low laugh, the kind of complicit laugh from someone sharing a secret they shouldn't, and responded, lowering her voice a bit, but not enough. "No, it's not. The other one is much younger, you know? Better dressed too. She always wears those elegant dresses, impeccable makeup. They have a fixed reserved table, always the same one. They always order the same bottle of wine. Even the waiters already know exactly what to serve when they arrive. It's beautiful to see, actually. The way he looks at her. It's like a soap opera. Each word was a blow. Each revelation a piece of glass entering my skin. Fixed, reserved table. Same bottle of wine. The waiters already know. The way he looks at her. It wasn't once. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness or confusion. It was a routine. It was a habit. It was another relationship happening parallel to ours, organized and consistent, with the structure and predictability that any real couple would have. For a second, a long, suffocating second, I thought I was hearing wrong, that I had confused the words, that they were talking about another man, that this was an absurd misunderstanding that would soon be clarified, and we would laugh together about the strange coincidence. But when I looked directly at them, and our eyes met, when I saw recognition cross the younger employee's face, when I saw her eyes widen slightly with the sudden understanding that she had said too much and in front of the wrong person, when I saw embarrassment flush her cheeks, I knew it wasn't a mistake at all. I knew that every word spoken was painfully, cruelly true. They were talking about him, about my husband, about the man who slept beside me every night, about the man who promised to love me forever. The older employee nudged the younger one with her elbow, a discreet but urgent gesture of "shut up now." Both immediately adjusted their expressions, trying to erase the embarrassment from their faces. The younger one turned as red as a pepper. The older one forced a professional smile, the kind of smile that serves as a mask for any uncomfortable situation. "Good afternoon," said the older one, her voice coming out a little too loud, a little too forced. "Welcome to Myeongdong Hanok. Do you have a reservation?" My voice came out automatically, coming from some deep mechanical place where my brain still functioned on autopilot, even as my heart was shattering. "I do. Under Minjun." I saw recognition cross her face. The name obviously meant something. They exchanged glances quickly, a silent exchange loaded with meaning that I didn't need to hear to understand. She typed something on the computer in front of her, carefully avoided my gaze, and waved to a young waiter passing by with an empty tray. "This way, please," said the waiter, already turning to guide me through the restaurant. I followed him like an automaton, like a robot programmed to execute movements, but without any real awareness of what was happening. My legs moved, step after step on the varnished wooden floor, but I felt nothing. I didn't feel the ground beneath my feet. I didn't feel the weight of the thermal bag in my hand. I didn't feel the air entering and leaving my lungs. The only thing I felt was the employees' voices echoing in my head, repeating in an infinite loop like a stuck song. "The wife he brings every month. The wife he brings every month. The wife he brings every month. He brought another woman here. Every month." So regularly that the employees knew, that the waiters knew, that probably everyone who worked there knew. Everyone knew except me. The sound around me seemed distant, muffled, as if I were underwater or had cotton stuffed in my ears. My vision began to blur at the edges, the world losing focus. The only thing sharp, The only thing crystalline and cruel in its clarity was the path ahead. And then I saw him. He was sitting at a table at the back of the restaurant, near the large window where natural light, what remained of it on the cloudy day, entered soft and diffuse. The table was in a somewhat hidden corner, strategically positioned to offer privacy, the kind of table couples choose when they want intimacy, when they don't want to be seen. And beside him, touching his arm with that familiarity that only genuine intimacy allows, laughing at something he had just said, was a woman who wasn't me. She was beautiful, not in a threatening or exaggerated way, but in a way that hurt exactly because it was genuine. Long, straight, dark hair, shiny like expensive silk under the soft light. Delicate face with features that seemed drawn by someone with great patience. Perfectly arched eyebrows, small, straight nose, naturally full pink lips. She wore an elegant but discreet moss-green dress, clearly expensive, the kind of clothing that doesn't shout but whispers class. And the way she looked at him, God, the way she looked at him, was exactly the way I used to look in the first months of our relationship. Admiration, enchantment, complete fascination, as if he were the only person in the restaurant, in the world, in the universe. But what really destroyed me, what took the last intact pieces of my heart and crushed them into dust, was the way he looked back at her. It wasn't the tired, distant look he gave me when he came home. It wasn't the quick, polite, automatic smile he offered me when I asked how his day was. It wasn't the divided attention of someone who is physically present but emotionally absent. He was totally there, totally present. His eyes shone with a light I hadn't seen for, how long? A year? 2 years? Maybe more? His posture was relaxed but leaning forward, interested, engaged. He was laughing, a real laugh that wrinkled the corners of his eyes. And when he spoke, he gestured with his hands, the way he used to do when we were starting to date, when he got excited telling stories. He was in love with her, completely, obviously, painfully in love. I kept walking toward the table, because what else could I do? My body continued in motion while my mind screamed to stop, to run, to disappear before it was too late. Each step seemed to last an eternity. The wooden floor creaked slightly under my feet, small sounds that normally no one would notice, but that for me sounded like thunder. I passed other tables where people were eating and talking, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding there. For them, it was just another lunch. For me, it was the end of the world. The distance to his table seemed simultaneously infinite and too fast. I wanted it to last forever. I wanted to arrive quickly and end the agony of anticipation. When I got close to the table, he saw me. The smile died instantly. His face went pale. His eyes widened. For a brief second, I saw something I had never seen in him before. Pure panic. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low, tense, almost a harsh whisper. I couldn't speak. I looked at the woman beside him. She looked back at me, her expression changing from confusion to understanding, and then to embarrassment. She looked away, grabbed her purse, as if she wanted to disappear. "I brought your lunch," I managed to say, my voice coming out trembling, thin. I lifted the thermal bag. You said you didn't have time to eat properly, so I thought." He looked at the bag in my hands as if it were a bomb about to explode. "I didn't ask you to come here," he said dryly. "I wanted to surprise you." "Surprise?" He gave a short laugh, without humor. "You should have called first." "Why?" My voice came out louder than I intended. Some people at the surrounding tables looked. "Why should I call first to bring food to my husband?" He closed his eyes for a second, breathed deeply, and then opened them again, now trying to control the situation. "This is Jiwon," he said, pointing to the woman beside him. "A coworker. We were discussing an important project." "Coworker," I repeated, the word coming out bitter. I looked at her. "Do coworkers usually have lunch holding hands?" That's when I noticed. Their hands were on the table. No longer touching, of course. He had pulled away as soon as he saw me, but there was still a closeness there, an intimacy. I looked more carefully at the table. There were 2 plates, 2 glasses of red wine, and in the center, a small glass vase with white lilies. Lilies. The same flowers I held on our wedding day. The same flowers he said were my flowers, that would always remind me of him. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't a loud, explosive break. It was silent, like a fine porcelain vase falling on a polished floor and shattering into 1,000 pieces impossible to put back together. "These flowers," I began to say, but my voice failed. He didn't answer. He just looked away. The thermal bag slipped from my hands. It fell to the floor with a dull thud. The sound of glass breaking inside it echoed through the silent restaurant. White rice spilled across the wooden floor. Pieces of meat covered in dark sauce stained everything. The ginger tea leaked, forming a brown puddle that spread slowly. Everyone looked. The entire restaurant fell silent. But I couldn't move. I just stood there looking at that. At the lunch I had prepared with so much care, now destroyed on the floor. And I thought that this was a perfect metaphor for what was happening to my life. "I'm sorry," said Jiwon, her voice low, almost inaudible. "I didn't know that he was married?" I completed for her, looking directly into her eyes. "Or did you know and didn't care?" She turned red, opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. "Let's resolve this at home," said Minjun, already getting up, trying to grab me by the arm. I stepped back. "Don't touch me." He stopped. There was something in my tone, something new, something he had never heard, that made him hesitate. "How long?" I asked. "It's not what you're thinking. How long?" Silence. "How long have you been bringing her here? To our restaurant? To the table where we used to sit?" More silence. I looked around. I saw the waiters avoiding looking at us. I saw the reception employees whispering. I saw the other customers pretending they weren't paying attention, but clearly interested in the drama unfolding before them. And then I understood everything. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the second or third. This was a routine. They were known there. They had a reserved table. They had favorite dishes. They had flowers in the center of the table. They were a couple. And I was the intruder. "You're humiliating me," said Minjun, low, teeth clenched, in front of everyone. I laughed. It was a strange laugh, without joy, loaded with a pain so deep it hurt all the way to the bones. "I'm humiliating you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Me?" I felt tears beginning to burn in my eyes. I blinked hard, trying to hold them back. I didn't want to cry there. Not in front of him. Not in front of her. Not in front of all those strangers who were watching my life crumble as if it were a soap opera episode. I turned my back and left. I left that restaurant without looking back. I pushed the door so hard it hit the wall. The cold wind outside received me like a slap in the face, and I began to walk. Without destination, without direction, just walking. The streets of Gangnam were crowded. People passed by in a hurry, carrying shopping bags, talking on cell phones, laughing with friends. The world kept turning, indifferent, and I was there, falling apart inside, feeling like my chest was going to implode at any moment. Little did I know that this humiliation would be the beginning of my strength. I walked for hours. I passed stores I had visited with him, cafeterias where we had coffee together, corners where we had kissed. Each place was a memory, and each memory was now stained, contaminated, destroyed. I remembered the first time we saw each other. It was at a party with mutual friends. He was leaning against the wall, drinking beer, looking bored with everything. I laughed at something my friend said, and our gazes crossed. He smiled, and that was it. That was all it took. I remembered our first kiss. It was on the banks of the Han River on a summer night. The moon was full, reflecting on the dark water. He held my face with both hands and said, "I've never felt this for anyone." And I believed him. I believed completely. I remembered the proposal. It was simple, without big productions. We were at home, watching some random movie. He suddenly paused, looked at me and said, "Marry me." Just like that. Direct. No beating around the bush. And I said yes before he even finished the question. All these memories, which before were precious, now seemed like lies, as if he had rehearsed each word, each gesture, each promise, as if I were just another scene in the script of his life. I stopped in front of a flower shop. The window was full of colorful arrangements, red roses, yellow tulips, purple chrysanthemums, and in the center, a large bouquet of white lilies. I stood looking at those flowers for a long time. I remembered the wedding day. I remembered how he said lilies symbolized purity and devotion. I remembered how I held that bouquet with trembling hands, walking down the church aisle, looking only at him, feeling I was living the happiest day of my life. How can something so beautiful transform into something so painful? I started walking again. I went down the subway station stairs. The place was less crowded now, mid-afternoon, the time between lunch and work closing. I sat on the platform bench and waited for the train. I looked at the tracks, at the darkness of the tunnel, and for a brief and frightening moment, I thought about jumping. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because the pain was so great, so overwhelming, that I couldn't imagine how to survive it. But then the train arrived, the doors opened, and I got in. I sat near the window and looked at the reflection in the dark glass. The woman looking back didn't look like me. She had red, swollen eyes. She had the expression of someone who had just lost everything. She had the posture of someone carrying the world on their shoulders. The sound of the tracks was hypnotizing. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. Like a metronome marking time, marking the seconds, minutes, hours I would never get back. I thought about all the nights I stayed awake waiting for him. About all the times I ignored my own instincts because I wanted to believe everything was okay. About all the unanswered messages, the calls that went to voicemail, the flimsy excuses I swallowed without questioning. The signs were always there. I just chose not to see them. Or maybe I saw them, but was too afraid of what I would find if I looked for real. It's funny how we deceive ourselves. How we construct narratives in our own heads to justify the unjustifiable. He's tired from work. He's stressed. He still loves me. He's just going through a difficult phase. We lie to ourselves because the truth is too scary to face. But that afternoon, sitting in that empty car, watching Seoul pass by the window in a blur of lights and shadows, I couldn't lie anymore. The truth was clear, crystalline, cruel. He didn't love me anymore. Maybe he never really loved me. I got off at my station and walked home. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. When I put the key in the lock and opened the door, I was greeted by silence. That heavy, suffocating silence that fills the house when you realize you're alone even though you're married. I let my bag fall to the floor. I took off my shoes. I took off my coat. And I sat right there, on the living room floor, leaning against the wall. The afternoon light entered weakly through the window, creating long shadows on the wooden floor. I looked at our apartment, at the furniture we chose together, at the photos on the walls, at the details we built over the years, and everything seemed empty. Everything seemed false. Who was I in that relationship? Who had I become trying to make it work? I looked at the photos hanging on the wall. Our wedding party, our honeymoon in Jeju, the 1-year anniversary, last Christmas. In all of them, I was smiling, but now, looking with distance, I could see. I could see that his smile didn't reach his eyes. I could see that he was always a little distant, even when he was close. I could see that I was trying so hard to look happy that I didn't notice I was miserable. I began to feel anger, not just at him, but at myself. Anger for having believed, for having dedicated myself so much, for having erased myself, for having forgotten myself in the middle of it all. How much of me did I lose trying to be the perfect wife for a man who didn't even see me? Have you ever been faithful to someone who had already betrayed you in their heart? If you have, tell me. I need to know I wasn't the only one. I sat there until the sun set completely, until the room went dark, until the cold of night began to enter through the cracks in the window. And I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because the tears seemed to have dried up, as if my body had understood that crying wouldn't change anything. Around 10 at night, I heard the key in the door. He came in, turned on the light, saw me there, sitting on the floor. "You've been sitting there this whole time?" he asked. I didn't answer. He left his briefcase on the floor, took off his coat, and sat on the sofa. We were silent for a long time. He looked at his hands. I looked at the wall. "I can explain," he finally said. "You don't need to. It's not what you're thinking." "Then what is it?" More silence. "It's just complicated," he said, his voice low. I gave a bitter laugh. "Complicated, of course. Everything involving betraying someone is complicated. I didn't betray you." I turned to look at him. For the first time that night, our eyes met. "You have lunch with another woman every month. You have a reserved table. You have flowers on the table. Lilies, Minjun, lilies, the flowers from our wedding. And you want to convince me you didn't betray me?" He looked away. "We never did anything. You did worse. Worse? You fell in love with her." The silence that followed was so heavy you could almost hear it. And in the middle of that silence, I saw the confirmation I didn't want to see. I saw it in the way he lowered his head, in the way his shoulders fell, in the way he didn't deny it. I got up from the floor. My legs were numb from sitting so long. I went to the bedroom, grabbed a blanket and a pillow, and returned. "You're sleeping on the sofa tonight," I said, throwing the things at him. "We need to talk about this. We have nothing to talk about. Not today." And I went to the bedroom. I locked the door. I lay on the bed, on our bed, and stared at the ceiling. The room was dark, but I could see the outlines of everything. The wardrobe where our clothes were mixed, the dresser where our things were, the bedside table where he always left his cell phone to charge. The cell phone. Did she send him messages in the early morning? Did he delete everything before I woke up? Did he sometimes, when I slept beside him, think about her? The questions multiplied in my head like a plague, and each one hurt more than the previous one. I spent the night awake, completely, painfully awake. I watched the bedside clock mark 1 in the morning. The red glow of the digital numbers was the only light in the dark room. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and with each passing hour, with each 60 minutes of heavy silence and thoughts that spun endlessly in my head, something changed inside me. The pain was there, yes, alive, pulsing, so intense that sometimes I had to hug my own body just to feel minimally whole. But along with it came something else, something small at first, but growing constantly like a plant that finally finds light after weeks buried in darkness. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Anger. Not the explosive, destructive anger that breaks plates and screams profanities. Not the anger that destroys everything around indiscriminately. But a cold anger. Calculated. Crystallized. The anger of someone who finally saw the truth after years of looking through rose-colored lenses. The anger of someone who realized they were treated as a second option, as a plan B, as the person who stayed home waiting while he lived an entire life with another person. I thought about all the nights I stayed awake waiting for him to arrive, sitting on the living room sofa, with my cell phone in hand, refreshing the screen every 5 minutes, checking if there was any message, the TV on some random channel, but not paying any attention to what was on, just waiting, always waiting. I thought about all the times I prepared special dinners, spending hours in the kitchen, testing new recipes, wanting to surprise him, only to eat alone at 10 at night, because he had a meeting that ran late. The cold food. The table set for 2 but occupied by only 1. The candles lit uselessly, melting to the end without witnessing any romantic moment. I thought about all the weekends we spent apart, he always with work commitments, important clients to entertain, conferences he couldn't miss, and me, at home, cleaning, organizing, watching movies alone, calling friends who gradually stopped calling me because I always had to cancel to be available in case he came home early. I thought about how many parts of myself I sacrificed trying to be the perfect wife, how I stopped going to the dance class I loved because the schedule coincided with when he might be home, how I gave up the book club because it meant going out 1 night a week, and he complained that I was never available when he wanted to spend time together that, ironically, never materialized, how I stopped seeing my family as often because he found family gatherings boring and too obligatory. I had become small, so small. I had shrunk so much trying to fit into the spaces he offered me, spaces increasingly smaller, increasingly insufficient, that I had almost disappeared completely. And for what? For a man who was building an entire life with another person while I faithfully maintained our home, our marriage, our future. The anger grew, but it wasn't just anger at him, it was anger at myself too. Anger for having believed so blindly, for having ignored all the signs that were so obvious in retrospect. For having become so dependent on his validation that I forgot how to validate myself, for having placed his needs so consistently above mine that I didn't even know what my own needs were anymore. When was the last time I did something just because I wanted to? When was the last time I made a decision without thinking first? But what will he think? When was the last time I felt whole, complete, sufficient alone? I couldn't remember. I had erased myself. I had diluted myself. I had dissolved myself in the idea of what a good wife should be, until there was almost nothing left of the person I was before him. The tears came then, not the dramatic, sobbing tears from before, but silent tears that ran from the corners of my eyes, wetting the pillow, coming from a place so deep it seemed to have no end. I cried for the woman I had been, for the woman I could have become, for all the wasted years, all the missed opportunities, all the versions of myself that I sacrificed on the altar of a marriage that after all was a lie. But underneath the tears, underneath the pain, there was something more. There was a promise I was silently making to myself. Never again. Never again would I make myself small for someone. Never again would I put my needs last. Never again would I accept crumbs of love and call it a feast. When the sun began to rise, that gray, weak dawn light of winter penetrating through the curtains, I had already made a decision. It wasn't an emotional or impulsive decision. It was a crystalline, clear, inevitable decision. I was going to divorce him. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to punish him, but because finally, after years, I was choosing myself. I was recognizing that I deserved more than being a second option, that I deserved a love that didn't have to compete, that I deserved someone who would choose me, completely and totally, every day. And if that someone hadn't appeared yet, then for now that someone would be myself. When the sun rose, I got up from the bed, unlocked the door, and went to the living room. He was still on the sofa, awake, looking at his cell phone. When he saw me, he quickly put the device away. "Good morning," he said, hesitant. "I want a divorce," I responded, my voice firm, without hesitation. He blinked, as if he hadn't understood. "What? You heard me? Wait, let's talk calmly. We can work this out." "There's nothing to work out. You're in love with another person. There's no point pretending this will pass." "I'm not in love. I just got confused." "Then get unconfused. But away from me." He got up from the sofa, tried to approach. "Please, give me a chance. We have years of history together. Don't throw everything away because of a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You call months of lies a mistake? You call building a relationship with another person while being married to me a mistake? It was just lunches, conversations, nothing more. And that makes it better? You think it hurts less just because you didn't sleep with her?" He remained silent. "You know what's worse than physical betrayal, Minjun? It's emotional betrayal, because I might even forgive a one-night mistake, a drunken moment, a moment of weakness. But forgiving someone who chose, consciously day after day, to invest in another person, that I can't do." I grabbed my purse and left. I went to work like a zombie. I sat at my desk, turned on the computer, and pretended everything was okay. My coworkers asked if I was okay. "Just a bad night's sleep," I replied, and they believed, or pretended to believe. During lunch break, instead of eating, I went to a law office. The receptionist received me with a professional smile and took me to a small room where a middle-aged female lawyer was waiting for me. "How can I help you?" she asked. "I want to get divorced," I said, and saying it out loud, for the first time to a stranger, I felt the weight of those words. She picked up a pen and a notepad. "How long have you been married?" 5 years. "Children?" "No." "Reason?" I hesitated for a second. Then I said, "Emotional infidelity." She nodded, as if she had heard that hundreds of times. "Do you have joint assets?" "An apartment, a car, some joint accounts." "I see. I'm going to need some documents. Marriage certificate, proof of income, deeds. Can you bring those?" "Yes." "Great. We'll start the process then." When I left that office, I felt something strange. It wasn't relief. It wasn't sadness. It was emptiness. As if I had just signed a death certificate for something that had been dead for a long time, but that I insisted on keeping alive. The following days were a fog, a strange period suspended between who I had been and who I was becoming. He tried to talk to me. He sent messages, many messages. They started short and defensive, then became longer, more desperate, more pleading. "I'm sorry. Please, let me explain." I deleted it. It was a mistake, a moment of confusion. It doesn't mean anything. I deleted it. I messed everything up, I know, but I love you. I always loved you. You're my wife. I deleted it. Please don't do this. We have years of history together. Don't throw everything away because of this. I deleted it. I already ended it with her. I'll never see her again. I promise. I swear. You have to believe me. I deleted it. Each message he sent was like a knife being slowly twisted in a wound. But curiously, it wasn't the knife that hurt most. It was the memory that one day, not long ago, those words would have worked, would have made me believe, would have convinced me that he deserved another chance, would have made me go back. But I had changed. Something fundamental inside me had broken in that restaurant. The part that believed love meant accepting any treatment, that forgiving meant forgetting, that being a good wife meant being invisible. And in place of what broke, something new was growing, something stronger, something that categorically refused to accept crumbs when it deserved the entire feast. 2 weeks after that terrible day, I returned to the apartment to get my things. I chose a time when I knew he would be at work. I didn't want to see him. I didn't need to see him. I had already said everything I needed to say, or rather, I had already said with my silence what words could never fully express. The apartment was exactly as I remembered. but at the same time completely different. It was like returning to a childhood home. Everything seemed smaller, stranger, less significant. The walls that witnessed so many silent arguments, the sofa where I spent so many nights waiting, the kitchen where I prepared so many meals that were eaten in a hurry or not eaten at all. Everything seemed smaller now. Or maybe it was me who had grown. I went straight to the bedroom. I took 2 large suitcases from the closet and began to fill them with my clothes. The pieces that were unequivocally mine, not the ones we bought together, not the ones he gave me, just the ones that were my personal expression. I realized as I packed that there were fewer than I imagined. At some point in the last 5 years, even my wardrobe had begun to reflect his tastes more than mine. I took my books, the ones he always called romantic nonsense or waste of time. I took my family photos, my parents, my siblings, my grandmother who had already passed away. I took the ceramic vase I made in an experimental class years ago, before I gave it up because he said I would never be good at it. I took my diplomas, my certificates, my notebooks with poems I used to write and abandoned when he commented they were too adolescent. I left everything that was ours. I left the framed memories. I left the gifts we gave each other. I left the objects we chose together for the apartment. I left the woman I was when I loved him. On the kitchen table, where we had eaten so many meals in increasingly heavy silences, I left a note, short, direct, final. I'm going to stay at my sister's house until the divorce is final. The papers are with my lawyer. You'll be contacted soon. Don't try to find me. Don't call. Don't send messages. Don't show up at my work. I need this space. You owe me at least that. I looked around the apartment one last time. I didn't feel nostalgia. I didn't feel regret. I felt only an emptiness that I knew would eventually be filled with better things, with memories that didn't hurt, with a version of myself that was yet to come. I closed the door slowly. I heard the lock click, and I began to descend the stairs, without looking back even once. At my sister's house, a small but cozy apartment in Mapo, full of plants and natural light, I finally allowed everything to crumble. I cried for the first time since that day. Not silent tears, but deep sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for hours, sitting on the floor of the guest room that my sister had prepared for me with so much care. She hugged me. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to fix or minimize or offer solutions. She just held me while years of pain, frustration, and unrequited love came out of my body in waves. When I finally stopped, when there were no more tears, when my throat was raw from crying so much, when my eyes were so swollen I could barely open them, I felt as if I had finally released something that had been stuck in my throat for years, as if I had vomited something toxic that had been slowly poisoning me. "You're going to be okay," said my sister, holding my face with both hands, looking directly into my red, swollen eyes. "Not now, not tomorrow, maybe not even next month, but you're going to be okay. You're stronger than you think, stronger than he ever let you believe you are." And for the first time, I began to believe that maybe she was right. I began to fill my days with small but meaningful things. I woke up early, not because I had to prepare breakfast for someone or because I had to have the house tidy before someone woke up, but simply because I wanted to see the sunrise. I walked to the park near my sister's house, Sangam World Cup Park, feeling the cold, clean winter air entering my lungs, watching the city slowly wake up. I saw people running, dogs playing, children going to school hand in hand with their parents. I saw life happening around me. Simple, normal, ordinary life, but somehow incredibly beautiful in its banality. I realized it had been years since I stopped to simply observe the world. I was always too busy taking care of him, the marriage, the house, keeping everything perfectly in place while secretly falling apart. I went back to reading. I bought 5 books one afternoon, novels, poetry, memoirs, fiction, without worrying if they were a waste of time or too emotional. I read them all in 2 weeks, sitting on the small sofa in my sister's living room, with a warm blanket and jasmine tea. I cried with some stories. I laughed with others. I saw myself reflected in characters who were also learning to rebuild themselves after being broken. I signed up for the pottery class I had always wanted to take. The first time I entered the studio, a small, cozy space in Hongdae, smelling of wet clay and creativity, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, simple excitement. Not excitement to please someone or to do something right, but excitement to discover something new about myself. When I put my hands in the wet clay for the first time, feeling it cold and soft between my fingers, melting and molding under my hands. Something inside me relaxed. The teacher, a 60-year-old lady with hands permanently stained with clay and kind eyes, showed the basic movements: how to center the clay on the wheel, how to wet your hands just the right amount, how to apply even pressure while the wheel spins. At first, everything I did collapsed. The clay slipped. The walls of the vase I was trying to create were uneven. My fingers applied too much pressure on one side, creating holes. It was frustrating, but at the same time, liberating. Because it didn't matter if I made mistakes. There was no one judging me, no impossible expectations, just me, the clay, and infinite chances to try again. After 3 classes, I finally managed to make my first complete vase. Small, imperfect. The edges were irregular. The base was a bit crooked. The thickness of the walls varied. But when I finished and saw it standing on the wheel, still spinning slowly, covered with splashes of water and clay from my attempts, I smiled. I smiled for real, deeply, for the first time in months, because that imperfect vase was mine, created by my hands, expression of my own ability to create something beautiful, even after destruction, proof that I could still build things, even when everything had crumbled. I began to reconnect with friends I had neglected during the marriage. I answered messages I had ignored. I accepted invitations I would have refused before. I went to cafes, museums, to the movies. I had real conversations, not the superficial, careful conversations I had with him, always avoiding topics that could cause conflict, always policing my words, but genuine conversations where I laughed too loud, where I talked about deep things, where I admitted vulnerabilities. A friend, Soo Jin, whom I had known since university but had drifted apart from because he thought she was a bad influence, said something that stayed with me. We were sitting in a small cafe in Itaewon, drinking expensive cappuccinos and sharing a huge slice of chocolate cake. "You seem different," she said, studying me with attentive eyes. "Lighter, somehow, as if you had taken off clothes that were too tight." And she was right. I was lighter. With each passing day, with each small act of self-care, with each moment when I chose my own needs over someone else's expectations, I became a little lighter. One day, a few weeks after the divorce, I was walking through Gangnam after work. Without realizing it, I found myself in front of the restaurant. That restaurant, where everything had crumbled. I stood on the sidewalk, looking through the window. The gold signs still gleamed. The tables were still full of people laughing, eating, living, as if nothing had happened, as if my pain hadn't left any mark on that place. I took a deep breath, and then, without thinking too much, I pushed the door and entered. The same receptionist from before was there. She recognized me. I saw it in the flash of surprise that crossed her face, but didn't say anything. She just smiled professionally and asked, "Table for how many?" "1," I replied, my voice firm. She took me to a table near the window. Not the same table as before, but close. I sat, picked up the menu, and ordered the same dish I had prepared for him that day: bulgogi, rice, kimchi. When the food arrived, I looked at the plate. I smelled it. I tasted it, and it was delicious. Better than I remembered. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. I looked out the window, seeing people passing by in a hurry, and realized something. That place no longer had power over me. That memory no longer had power over me. I had returned there, not to confront ghosts, but to prove to myself that I could, that I was bigger than the pain, that I survived. I paid the bill, left a generous tip, and left. At the door, the receptionist stopped me. "I'm sorry for what happened that day," she said quietly. "We didn't know. If we had known, we would have warned you." I smiled at her. "It's okay. In the end, it was good that I found out. And it was true. Did it hurt? Yes. Did it almost destroy me? Yes. But it freed me. Sometimes what we lose isn't love. It's the illusion that it existed." The months passed. Winter gave way to spring, and the streets of Seoul began to bloom. Cherry trees filled the sidewalks with pink petals. The air became warmer, lighter, and I changed too. Not overnight. It wasn't magical or instantaneous, but gradually, imperceptibly, I was becoming another person, a better version of myself. I began to smile easily again. I began to make plans for the future. I was promoted at work. I made new friendships. I traveled alone for the first time. I went to Busan, spent a weekend walking on the beach, eating seafood, watching the sun rise over the sea, and I didn't miss him. Not once. There were moments, of course, when longing hit. Not longing for him specifically, but for what I thought we had. Longing for the idea of having someone, of not being alone. But then I remembered, being alone is not the same as being lonely. When you're alone, you have peace. When you're in a bad relationship, you have loneliness. One day, a few months later, I was in a cafe in Hongdae, working on my laptop. The cafe was full, noisy, with the sound of voices mixed with the soft music playing in the background. And suddenly, I heard someone call my name. I looked up and saw a familiar face. Tai Hyun, a former college classmate. We hadn't seen each other in years. "Can I sit?" he asked, smiling. "Sure." We talked for hours, about life, about work, about old times. He was funny, intelligent, attentive. At one point he asked if I was seeing anyone. "No," I replied. "And you?" "Me neither. Actually, I just got out of a complicated relationship. I understand the feeling." He laughed. "It's hard, isn't it? Starting over. Trusting again." "It is. But I think it's necessary." We left there together. He walked me to the subway station. Before we said goodbye, he asked if we could see each other again. Not as a date, just as friends. "I'd love to," I said sincerely. And smiling, I descended the station stairs. I don't know if something will happen between us. I don't know if I'm ready to open up again. But for the first time, I feel I would be capable. That trusting again isn't a death sentence. That loving again doesn't mean losing myself again. Today, when I walk through the illuminated streets of Seoul, through the same wide avenues of Gangnam where I walked on that terrible day, through Han River Park where I used to dream of a future that never came, through the narrow alleys of Hongdae where I'm rediscovering who I am, I feel the cold wind hitting my face. But inside me, there's a completely new calm, a peace that doesn't depend on answered messages, a happiness that isn't conditioned on another person's presence or approval, a completeness that is only mine. The pain transformed into a seed, and from that seed was born something I never, not even in my most optimistic dreams, imagined feeling again. Genuine self-love. Not the kind of self-love you declare on social media or put in motivational phrases, but the quiet, deep, unshakable kind that comes from having survived your worst nightmare and discovered there's still a you on the other side. It took me a while to understand, but I finally understood with every cell in my body. The greatest love we can find doesn't come from another person. It comes from within. Because when you truly love yourself, when you deeply respect yourself, you simply don't accept less than you deserve. You don't negotiate your worth. You don't make concessions with your dignity. Sometimes life breaks us just to test if we're still capable of getting up. It throws us to the ground with such force that we think we'll never be able to stand again. But it's exactly in those moments, in the moments when we're literally on our knees, covered in wounds, barely able to breathe, that we discover what we're really made of. We discover a strength we didn't even know existed, a resilience that was dormant, waiting to be summoned. I fell. God knows how I fell. I fell so hard I thought I would never get up. I thought I would stay forever on that cold restaurant floor where my life shattered. But I got up, slowly, trembling, in pain. But I got up. If you've already fallen and gotten up, if you've already felt the ground open beneath your feet and still found a way to survive, to continue, to wake up the next day and try again, comment below. I did it. It's not just for engagement. It's because I genuinely need to feel your strength. I need to know we're not alone in this. That there's an army of strong women who understand exactly what it means to rise from your own ashes. In Korea, I learned a fundamental truth that I now carry tattooed on my heart. Even the most brutal, longest, most merciless winter always holds a spring. The cherry trees bloom again. The snow melts. The sun shines again with full force. Life returns. And we also return. Not as we were before, but as something new. Something that could only exist after the cold. And sometimes, more often than we'd like to admit, the end isn't the final period. It's not the death of everything. It's just simply the beginning of who we need to become. The person who was always there, buried under layers of expectations, sacrifices, small daily deaths. The person who was waiting for permission to finally exist in their truest form. Today, when I look back, not with anger or bitterness, but with the clarity that only distance can bring, I no longer see the destroyed lunchbox scattered on that polished wooden floor. I no longer see the white lilies on their table, mocking the promises he made me. I no longer see that smile of his that wasn't for me, that was never really for me. What I see is a woman who faced the worst pain of her life and came out the other side transformed. A woman who had the courage to choose herself when it would have been infinitely easier, more comfortable, more socially accepted to stay. A woman who learned, through fire and tears, that the love she desperately searched for in all the wrong places was, all along, waiting patiently to be discovered inside her own heart. The city lights reflect on the Han River as they always do, shimmering, dancing on the dark water like fallen stars. I walk slowly along the bank, breathing deeply that soul night air that has become so familiar. The air is freezing, but I don't feel it, because inside me, finally, there's warmth, there's light, there's real, genuine, pulsing life. And when I arrive home, in my small apartment that I rented with my own money, decorated with my own taste, filled only with things I chose because they make me happy, I look around and feel pride. Pride in every decision that brought me here. Pride in every day I chose not to give up. Pride in having believed I deserved more. I look at the ceramic vase I made with my own hands. It's still on the shelf where I placed it on the first day. Imperfect, with small cracks that the teacher said are natural characteristics of clay, crooked in some places, uneven in others, but still, in a strange and unexpected way, beautiful, just like me, imperfect. Cracked in some places where I broke and healed, still learning, still growing, but beautiful, complete, enough. The love he denied me, the love he gave to another person while I patiently waited for crumbs. I learned to give to myself, and I discovered that when you truly love yourself, when you fill your own heart, when you become your own priority, you become magnetic in a completely new way, not because you're looking for validation, but because you finally stopped looking. And that was the greatest victory of all. It wasn't destroying him. It wasn't finding someone better to get revenge. It was simply finding myself, choosing myself, prioritizing myself, loving myself the way I always deserved to be loved. If this story touched you in some way, if you've been through something similar, if you're going through it now, if you know someone who's going through it, I want you to know with absolute certainty, you're not alone. The pain you're feeling now is temporary, no matter how eternal it seems at this moment. The strength you're discovering is permanent, and you are so much more than anyone who made you doubt your worth. Leave a heart in the comments. Share with someone who needs to hear this. And remember, always remember, you are enough, complete, deserving, exactly the way you are, not because someone validated you, but because you were born deserving everything good that life can offer. It doesn't matter how many times you fall. It doesn't matter how many times your heart is broken. It doesn't matter how many times you have to start from zero. What matters, the only thing that really, truly matters, is how many times you get up. And I got up, trembling, wounded, different from what I was before. But I got up, and you can too. You will too. You're getting up at this exact moment, even if you can't see it yet. Spring always comes, always, even after the longest winter. Trust that. Trust yourself. Trust that better days aren't just possible, they're inevitable. You deserve the entire feast. Don't accept the crumbs.